Welcome to the season 2 finale of Unmute Yourself. I'm Jennifer Carter, and before we start, I want to say this. If this season has taught us anything, it's that silence is expensive. Playing small costs us our health, and pretending we're fine in systems that aren't working is not resilience, it's exhaustion. Season 2 has been about pulling threads, questioning assumptions, and telling the truth about what it actually takes to lead, grow, and stay whole in a world that rewards performance over humanity. So today's episode isn't a wrap up, it's a reckoning. And there is no better person to close this season with than someone who has spent her career helping leaders name what's broken, let go of that cape, and build change that doesn't destroy the people inside it. Oof, I'm getting chills. Okay, my guest today is Nicole. Oh my gosh, no, y'all, we just talked about how to say her name and I got it right on the first try. And now I'm questioning it. Wait,
It's
let me
because
try
I
it.
gave you all the wrong ones. It's
Right.
Paquet. You had it right.
I had it right. Okay, so
Yeah.
my guest today is Nicole Paquet, a change leadership consultant, former executive, and a woman who has spent her career navigating disruption, uncertainty, and systems that weren't designed with women in mind. Nicole began her career in traditional consulting and change management, working across utilities, resources, and global firms, often in deeply male-dominated environments. She built an impressive resume, raised her children, moved across the country to stay close to family, and kept trying to make herself fit inside structures that promised success but demanded silence. Over time, Nicole realized the problem wasn't her. It was the way change was being led. Top down, scripted, performative, I know y'all know what I'm talking about, and disconnected from the real human experience. Today, she is rewriting that approach. Through her work, her TEDx talk, and her guidebook, Thriving Through Change, Nicole helps leaders co-create paths forward, name what's hard, and build resilience without burning themselves out trying to be strong. I am so glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here.
So let's just start at the beginning. Right. So you spent years in consulting in large firms. What were you hoping to find, right? When you kept saying, maybe this one will fit, maybe this is the one.
Yeah, it's so interesting because obviously now at this point in my life, I look back and I can see that it was just always more of the same. But I kept hoping because I'm kind of this eternal optimist, and I kept hoping that maybe another firm would do things a little bit differently. And while there were nuances, it was still kind of the same pattern. And when I look back and I think, like, when did the red flags really start? I mean, I think it probably started when I started my career with a global firm, and I was there for 7 years doing, on the outside, all the right things. And I had my first 2 children while I was working with that firm. And when I came back from my second mat leave, I was really under a lot of pressure to get on the plane again. And this was at a time when consultants traveled, Monday to Friday, and we were at the client site. This wasn't a world of virtual consulting at all. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I ended up having a phone call with a global partner in our sector. And she said, you know what, Nicole, like you just have to start. And it would only be, we'll let you just go 3 days a week. And at the time I was still breastfeeding my second baby. And she said, you'll get used to it. Listen, this is what I did. I started traveling when my son was 30 days old, and you just get help and you get used to it. And I remember hanging up the phone and thinking, I cannot do this. It was like this very clear decision. And I did choose to leave that firm, but it really took a toll. And I worked for myself for a while. And I thought, yeah, my career is not over. I was still very young. And I thought, okay, I'll try a different firm and try something different. And all the promises were there, and the flowery talk of, whatever the version of we care about our people, and, this is all about putting women first. And even at that firm I was at, they had a whole tagline. It was a great place to work for women. And this was the reality. And so what I was seeing in the culture statements and what I was living and what we were all living just didn't match up. And inside of me, I felt kind of ill, honestly, that really didn't mesh for me. Uh, but I really still felt like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm going to try to figure it out and go somewhere else. And this pattern really continued even up until, just a couple of years ago when I kept trying different firms in little places of, I would have a self-employed stint and work within industry and try different things. I mean, I feel very lucky because I was still able to work in my field and work in change management and change leadership. But what I was seeing was this pattern of, not listening, top down, really kind of directive. And it didn't work at all for me in kind of what I wanted out of my whole life. And I did get sick. I was sick, a number of times through my career. And again, I thought it was me.
Did you finally figure out that it wasn't you and that this
Mm.
is how the system was built?
Yeah, I think that it came in little snippets, I would say. I think, there's been I did a lot of work, I did a lot of growing in the past decade or so, because really, like, I brought this into my personal life as well, and I wasn't in a healthy relationship, and I was really kind of silencing myself there as well, and I hit a breaking point, and I knew that I had to shift the way I was thinking, but I kinda like to joke that I'm a bit of a slow learner. So I, really had to do a lot of work over the years, but when it really hit me, and I now again in hindsight, it was during a trek to Everest Base Camp in Nepal. And yeah, I went with my husband and it was his birthday wish, and I was like, "Okay, like, I love the mountains and I love hiking, but I'm not so sure about this. This is a lot of work and there's altitude and, a lot of discomfort," which, I always loved the outside. But I did say yes, and we went ahead. And of course, as somebody who leads change and works on project, I went into, what I like to call project management mode because I just kind of have these strong control preferences. I'm not a control freak, but I have these strong control preferences. So that's what I did. And, I made sure that we were training, and I was a bit of a bear, to be honest. I was making sure he was doing everything he needed to do. And we got onto the mountain and it was incredible and beautiful. But then the altitude hit me. Like, it hit me. So this is the reality of no matter how much we prepare and how much we try to manage the situation, I was taught on that mountain that my traditional methods of trying to, kind of muscle through and do what I was supposed to do, it just wasn't working. And so when I look back, I realized, you know what? I had to loosen my grip and I had to really kind of speak the truth of what was happening and that I needed support. And so those three things kind of bled into everything in my life. And so when I started again, when I got back, I tried another firm. This one was smaller and had all of the promises, and it didn't go well. It was not a psychologically safe environment. People were not welcome to speak up. And I was a senior leader at the time. And at this point in my career, this is when I started to really see things. I was like, no, this is not. I trust myself now after all of the work. And so I had to bring in those same lessons and I had to say, you know what? I got to loosen my grip. This is not about me. This is the situation, right? This is the environment. This is the structure. This is the reality that many of us as women have faced throughout of our career. And then I spoke the truth and I went forward and talked to a very senior person and said, "There's no psychological safety. Here's what I'm seeing." And they kind of said, "Oh, what even is psychological safety?" Right. And so that was when I thought, no, there's no support here, even though, we all as women need to not try to do it all and ask for support. And it wasn't there. So I chose to leave. And that's when everything shifted for me. Like as soon as I walked out and I knew it was like the last time kind of really seeing it for what it was and not trying to fool myself. So I had to allow that to be what it was and say, you know what, for me, my values and what I want in my career and in my life, it's not for me, and that's okay. And so I, relaunched my business and I wrote my book and I've, kind of been really feeling whole since then. And it wasn't just that moment of walking away. It was really kind of, your question is, when did you finally know? And that's when I finally knew, but it really took a toll even then. I was sick, because I always, I kind of equate it to when we're in these environments, it's like how I felt when I was, at these altitudes on Everest Base Camp. It's thin air and you can't breathe. And so, how do you learn to thrive when the air is thin in life, at work, right? And so naming what it is first is really key.
My brain is exploding right now because all I can think about is why the heck is our corporate world built this way? How did it get
Right.
so suffocating,
Mhm.
controlling, abusive? I'm
Yep.
just gonna say abusive. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think it's about? Like, why? And I haven't been
Yeah.
able to figure it out yet. I think I know, but you know how
Yeah,
this.
there's a lot, right? Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you could go back to the Industrial Revolution. So I teach leadership and human behavior at the MBA level. And so the textbooks kind of take you back through this history and the different kinds of leadership. And we treated people like kind of widgets, right? And so we knew that wasn't right. So we tried to kind of create some more human related systems. But I think what's happening is our evolution as individuals is outpacing the organizational kind of transition and transformation. And so for those of us, so I'm a Gen Xer, and for those of us who are leaders in my generation, we were taught that the right way to lead was to have a sense of certainty, right? And so it was all about command, control, certainty, top down structures. And as the world has become more uncertain and more chaotic, and really like disruptive. So the environment is outpacing those methods. And at the same time, humans, we are saying enough, right? And as women, we have seen, I think, for a long time, that those structures of command, control, certainty probably never worked to really unleash the power of people. But especially now, we cannot manage. There is no certainty. And so it's calling for a completely different kind of leadership that we haven't really created the competency around. And that is to loosen our grip. It's to say things are chaotic, and it is to ask our teams and require them almost to provide their input. And I think, again, as women, I think that we tend to be kind of see things for what they are. And so this is very much aligned with, I think, our natural way of showing up and leading. Not every human, right? But just as a kind of general tendency. But the patriarchy and the top down, it does not fit with the reality of disruption and chaos. And so that's actually creating even more of a disconnect because people are standing up and saying, no, this is not okay. I'm a human. I have a lot of opinions. I have a voice, and my voice matters because of what I'm seeing. And that's really kind of the trick to navigating through personal and professional disruption and change is to kind of say, okay, what are we seeing? Let's get many perspectives, right? The diverse perspectives who are touching the customers and the clients and the public if we're servants, right? And so how do we make sure that we collectively have a better understanding of what's going on? But what that requires is a letting go of control. And as a reforming control freak slash someone with high control preferences, I
Same.
know that's hard, right?
Right.
That's one of the hardest things for us to do. And it's our ego is wrapped up in it. And I don't mean we're all like, high ego, but it is we're attached to it as individuals. And so we want things to go the way we want them to go. And we try to manage and control and plan, and so when things change that we didn't know about, we're not really in a place where we can keep up. So there's just too much happening out there.
So, how do you recommend helping leaders and organizations adapt, adjust, change, pivot
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
be able to lead in this way that is more human centric and less controlling?
Yeah. So there's a few things and a few different tools. So I'm a facilitator, a trained facilitator, and so part of what I am seeing that, we've kind of forgotten how to have conversations, right? And so it is the leader's job to create an environment where conversation is a regular occurrence. And that again is uncomfortable. And so having some structures and some kind of guiding questions in order to walk into those conversations. And I do always recommend, like, for a team going through any kind of disruption, whether it's planned or unplanned, kind of pulling back and let's take a few hours and bring in somebody who knows how to guide those conversations to level set and kind of let people process. And there's a way to guide those questions, kind of from very easy, kind of top level observational down to like, how do we interpret what we're seeing and what do we do with that? And so with that structure, the team can start to process what's happening together. And with the leader guiding or being, an important part of that conversation, what that does, it closes the gap and increases the trust because the team's seeing like, oh, they're actually leaning in and they want to kind of understand what we're seeing, what are the roadblocks that are out there. And so that's a tool, right? And so I work with leaders to kind of how do we have those kinds of meaningful conversations? They don't all have to be off sites, right? And so, I talk about here's some tools that like how to have conversations, like very simple, right? How to have regular and meaningful connected one-on-ones to build the trust and to get to know people because that's really important. Again, we've forgotten that, you know, we are all people, right? And it's
Right.
important that we have that connection at work because we all spend on average about, half of our waking hours at work. And so if you know your people, you know when things start to go off a little bit and you know how to support them through their own personal crises and what's happening at work. And so, I really encourage leaders to get to know their people and kind of flip the way they approach their one-on-ones and their meetings so it's more listening, kind of guidance, and it's less about certainty and more about what might we do together. And so those are some of the things. And then I also work with leaders kind of one-on-one coaching if they're going through like a really kind of heavy period of change and we can talk through that kind of thing and like what are you seeing? What are some tools? And that's, the big thing if, to get us to move forward though is really it's a mindset shift to say, okay, I don't have all the answers. It's
Mhm.
impossible as the leader that I have all the answers. My team is a wealth of information, and I am going to step into that discomfort and maybe showing that I don't know everything, which is tough for Gen Xers like me, and really kind of show that I'm willing and intentional about co-creation and moving forward together.
How do you know a leader is ready for that conversation and ready to make an actual change rather
Mm,
than just lip service and saying, "Oh,
mm,
yeah, we're a great place." You know what I mean? Like, because I'm sure you
yeah,
get a lot of inquiries and you
yeah.
see a lot of different, I don't know, spectrums of people and their change readiness.
Totally. Yeah. And so a few things that I see right away. And so traditional, when I started in change management, and I think even today, a lot of change management practitioners really focus on, okay, I'm going to come in and do an assessment and I'm going to give you the key messages and I'm going to, so if a prospective client is asking me to do things kind of on their behalf with their team, then that's the conversation that we need to have, right? And so the big nuance, I would say, so everything I'm talking about, co-creation, engagement, leaders kind of stepping in. This is not all that different from what we talk about in managing change traditionally. The difference is that it needs to be in the hands of the leader. And so the leader needs to show that willingness to speak to their team, with their team. I really work more as a coach on the side. I will do kind of strategic planning and facilitated planning sessions, but it really needs to be, okay, we've done this and now you own this, right? Looking back kind of early and when I worked on my business early on, I took a client who I thought it was great. Like he said all of the right things, and we co created a roadmap. And then we did all of that. And it was kind of like, okay, yeah, but now, Nicole, what are you going to do? And it was so interesting because I had laid it all out. I know from all of my training in all of those big firms, I know how to kind of display a plan and a roadmap and,
Right.
get clear on roles and responsibilities, but he had no intention of changing his behavior. And that was really at the crux of where the organization was stuck. He talked a lot about, people are saying they're unhappy and they don't, with another thing that I always hear is people say we need more communication. And they say, but we've got a newsletter and we've got updates and we have town
Mhm.
halls. And so what's actually under that is that they need higher quality communication and they need it from their immediate supervisor. And in some cases, they need it from the senior leaders, depending on what kind of the scope and the scale of the message is and what's happening in the organization. And so those are things, I'll see if somebody is kind of saying, okay, Nicole, like I need you to come in and, coach my middle managers and they need to do something. If it's kind of a they problem versus I need help with leading through this transition, but the intention is there that the leader owns it, then I know that that's a great fit. And then that's the other thing, like communication, right? And I say, okay, well, tell me about your one-on-ones. Tell me about the conversations that you're having with your team and tell me about how you gather input and how much listening is happening, right? So those are a couple of things that are now I see them as dead giveaways, but I think I was always, again, the eternal optimist and
Right.
assuming that if people wanted to hire and bring me in, that they really wanted to lead the change or lead whatever, disruption they were going through. But sometimes they just kind of want to put it off to the side and avoid the discomfort of having that back and forth, which, we call those difficult
Right.
conversations, right? They're just conversations where people have opinions. So even that, I think we've created a whole, language around Why is it so hard to bring people in and co-create? So, yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
I bet you learned so much.
I still
I
am. Yeah,
do
still
wonder,
learning.
from my experience, I've seen leaders, they want a new process or a
Mhm.
system or something very, very tangible that guarantees a business outcome.
Mhm.
How do you handle those conversations
Mhm.
if this can be seen or labeled as soft or woo
Mhm.
woo or a nice
Yep.
to have? Because you and I
Yep.
both know it's essential
Yep.
to success. So how do you handle that?
100%. Yeah, so I think so first of all, I'm a big process improvement geek. I'm a little bit of a hybrid when it comes to so I believe in strategic planning. I believe
Mhm.
in, continuous improvement and really naming processes. I've done process mapping. And so I get the business side. I mean, it's a business, right? What's missing is that people are foundational to creating and improving whatever processes we need in order to meet customer demand or improve our profitability, whatever that happens to be. And so we can't make meaningful change and get to a business outcome without fully leveraging our people in a way that is also meaningful to them. And that's why that co-creation along the path of process improvement is key because all that happens if we don't actually bring people in and co-create, we're missing the boat on getting the truth. So I talked earlier about like loosening our grip and speaking the truth. And so a big part of this process when if there's an organization that wants to improve a certain business outcome, we need to bring in the people who are seeing the actual barriers that customers are facing or the public is facing, right? Or our clients, whatever that is. They are seeing all of this firsthand. We might not want to admit it because it might be a change that we didn't really know had to happen, but we are doing ourselves a favor by getting it right the first time, or at least closer to right. And so it's really about bringing people in to get better data, to get energy levels up. Humans operate on energy. And so what brings energy up is human connection, right? Trust. And so if we build that, you're going to get way more out of your team. Like if you really just want to think about it in terms of business outcome and productivity, creating connection and trust is foundational to better performance and better productivity, like 100%. And so the only
Amazing.
way to do that is to bring people in. And I would say, I always say leaders talk about the fact, well, I asked people if they had anything to add, right? There is a way to pull information and to pull engagement from people. And it has to be an expectation. So we need to think about our performance management and what are we rewarding and recognizing? We should be rewarding and recognizing people speaking up in meetings, right? Whereas many organizations, it's the opposite. People who speak up are kind of seen as troublemakers, right?
Oh my gosh. I have a list of
Right.
troublemakers that I just adore.
Total. Me too. I happen to be one of them. Yes. So I'm a big troublemaker now, right? But I wasn't comfortable or confident enough and I didn't have leaders saying, "Nicole, I really need to know what you're seeing. Like what are the barriers that you're seeing?" And they lean in and they listen. And I expect you, Nicole, to tell me what you're seeing out there. And I'm going to, manage your performance based on how much you're gonna bring forward. Like, imagine that's flipping the script, right? And that's what creates a thriving, change-ready organization in 2026 when I mean, hey, we're only February and talk about chaos, right? Like, there's so much
Holy shnikes.
happening in the
Right.
world, and markets are in complete chaos. And so, we need to be able to rely on our people to have the energy and the ideas to help us through.
I have a question for you, Nicole.
Okay.
If women stopped trying to be strong and started being honest, what do
Mhm.
you think would change first?
First, oh, because I was just like, everything would change. But
Yeah.
the first thing, if we stopped, oh my gosh. So I think what would happen first, this is my experience. When I finally stopped trying to be that strong person, right? And I invited support, what I found was there is way more support available to us and waiting in the wings to come. And so the people around us are waiting for a tiny indication that we're ready and open and that we're not going to keep pushing them away. So that's the first thing I think that would change is that we would create a network of support that then like really brings up the energy for all of us. And so with that, we have, we feel more empowered to speak up, to speak truth, right? In all of whether it's in our community, at our kids' schools, right? At work, whatever that happens to be, we know that there are people who have our back. And the problem with being strong is that it's incredibly isolating. And we can get all up in our head and it creates lower energy and lower confidence. Like I was never as low in confidence as when people probably thought I was the strongest.
Right. I call it being dead inside, like totally dead inside. Like I'm
Totally.
just going to go through the
Yes.
motions. Right.
Right. And people just assume, right? Like you've got it all together because we're working so hard to look like we're the strong woman and we've got it all together and I don't need anything. But the moment we allow others in, everything changes because we can then create more energy for ourselves, for our kids, for our communities, for our colleagues. That's when meaningful change
Right.
happens because like we're all operating, so many of us are depleted and no wonder productivity is lower and we're not getting the outcomes that we want. And women are half of the workforce, right? And so we have this tendency to feel like we have to go it alone and we have to look a certain way and we need to buy into the patriarchy. And that's actually when we're most damaging, when we buy into the patriarchy and we become the patriarchy.
Eat it, girl. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have you back because we could talk forever. Okay. So let's close with a few quick fire questions. So just
Okay.
answer with the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Okay. What's a bold idea you've had recently that scares you just enough to try it?
Well, I'm completely revamping my business and going full on into speaking. And
Oh, that's
so that is
awesome.
scary. Yeah, that's very scary.
Watch your talks. Girl, I'm excited for you. Okay. If you could unmute one topic people aren't talking about enough, what would it be?
Well, you know what? I have to say I am encouraged because so it's, we're taping this in February of
Hmm.
2026. There's a lot of unmuted muting happening right now. And the power behind, a lot of influencers and billionaires that has traditionally been incredibly damaging and abusive. We're shining a light on it. And I'm so hopeful. I'm grateful for those courageous people who are doing what they're doing. And I think that, maybe, just maybe, if we keep calling out that power, that dysfunctional power, that our world may just have a chance to right itself.
Damn. Mic drop moment. What? Okay. What's one small daily habit that's had a big impact on your mind?
Okay, this is gonna sound very silly. I restarted about 3 months ago, so I'm in my mid-50s for context, and I've always been quite active, but I was getting stiff and stiff and stiff,
Right.
and I couldn't sleep. I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, I have no mobility," and so I started stretching every night before bed, and so I have a nightly stretching habit. That's where it started, and
Oh,
now that's really evolved into a number of other, like, like I'm not a health freak, but just like really taking care of my mobility so that I can be present not just for my kids now, but who knows? They'll have kids someday. So I that has made a big difference in my quality of life, in my sleep, in my mindset, because it brings my mind to a place where I'm ready to rest and my body is ready.
Love it. And if listeners could take one action, not just an idea after hearing you speak today, what should it be?
So, a couple of things, if I'm allowed, but I would say it can be very overwhelming, right? When we think of
Right.
all of the things. But what matters most is the next right step. And so, thinking about when it all seems confusing, what can you name that is true inside of you? And what is one directionally aligned next step that, really can make sure that you're moving toward that direction. It doesn't need a perfect plan. You don't need to have everything fully baked. And this is coming from a lifelong planner. Take the next right step that is true to, what's inside of you.
And what's one word that captures who you are becoming right now?
Whole.
I'm not crying, you're crying. Yeah. It's so
Yeah,
good.
and
I
I
love it.
never thought that I would say that in a million years, and so it is possible, It's all with support.
Yeah.
That's the key. We can't do it alone.
No, we can't. Well, Nicole, this has been such a powerful conversation. Thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom. I'm just curious if listeners walk away remembering just one thing, what do you hope it is?
I do hope that people feel that no matter where they are in their life or what their perceived role is, that their voice matters. And it matters whether it's to their kids, to their partner, to their volunteer position, their corporate team, whatever it happens to be. That voice has power. And what it does, it enables that chain to continue. So others feel, yeah, you know what? She spoke up. They spoke up. I can speak too.
And how can listeners connect with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, but I also have my website, which is NicolePaquet.com. And so that's probably the easiest way. All my contact information is on there.
Well, thank you for this conversation, your honesty and clarity and willingness to name what so many people feel, but I think struggle to articulate. So,
Mm.
as we close out season 2 of Unmute Yourself, I keep coming back to the idea that growth doesn't always look like pushing harder, just like Nicole was talking about, right? Sometimes it looks like telling the truth. Sometimes it looks like stepping out of systems that no longer fit. And sometimes it looks like choosing yourself even when it's uncomfortable. This season has been about listening more closely to our bodies, our intuition, and the quiet voice inside that says there has to be another way. If something in today's conversation resonated with you, I hope you carry it forward, sit with it, question what you've been tolerating, and give yourself permission to want something different. Thank you for spending this season with me, for listening, reflecting, and doing the brave work of unmuting yourself. Until next time, take care.